This is That One Audition with Alyshia Ochse.
I am so excited to do this. There's so many things I want to pick at a little bit, but my first question after doing some research, NYU's Tisch School of the Summer Arts, did you just do this during the summer or were you there for the whole program?
Oh, I got my undergrad there. So yeah, let's see, was I there during the summer at all? I guess I did one summer program during the course of that time. But yeah, I got my BFA there. So yeah, it was.
That's what I thought. Because then I was curious how you were able to do Crash while also going to Tisch. I want to know, because that's a hell of a great first professional job to get.
Yeah.
And so when I was like, look at that. And normally with conservatories, they're not letting you audition. So I'm so curious how that came to be.
So NYU was a wonderful place for me. I know it's such a big school and there's so many different studios within Tisch that people have really different experiences. I studied at Atlantic. That was the studio that I studied at, Atlantic Theater Company. And I loved it. I can't say enough good stuff about that training program. And they were really both Atlantic and also NYU were really supportive of people auditioning and working as long as it didn't conflict with school hours. So I was really lucky in that Crash filmed. So just to back up a second, I don't come from an entertainment family. I didn't have I had no idea.
Even homeschooled. I was like, you were homeschooled, if that's correct, till 5th or 6th grade?
Yeah.
So
yeah. And
in Washington, I was like,
yeah.
Yes, just out in the woods doing whatever.
Exactly. My dad's a scientist. My mom's a teacher. I loved theater growing up. And so that was my dream, was to do theater. And I went to NYU. I wasn't sure if I was going to be an actor because I didn't have any model for any of that at all. And I applied for NYU. I took a year off because I couldn't decide whether to go to acting school or pre-med. And I just was a quandary. And to be honest, I didn't get into some of the BFA programs that I wanted to go to. So I was like, you know what? I don't know what I'm doing. So I took a year off and then I took a gap year. I taught English in Transylvania, which is a whole other story that is not relevant to this podcast. But during that time, I was like, if I have the chance to do the thing that I really want to do, I should try to do it. And so I ended up at NYU. But I realized really quickly at NYU that although theater was my dream, it's really hard to make a living doing theater. And I was on full student loans, working a work study job at night. Money was incredibly tight. And so I was not one of those kids who was out just having a great time. So I was really determined to work as much and as quickly as possible because I didn't really have an option, to be honest. So I got an agent while I was still in school, which was an incredibly lucky turn of fate. And I started immediately working hard on auditions. Yeah.
Yeah. Did you do the showcase? How did the agent come to be?
So I met them through a casting director who saw a clip of something that I did, a faux audition thing. It wasn't a showcase. It was through school a little bit, but the casting director saw that, put me in touch with an agent who they knew. And then thankfully that agent is still my agent. It honestly could have been anybody.
No way. I was going to ask that. Who was your agent at that time? Because I was like, for sure, she probably has bounced around. You're that Hollywood dream where you start dating in high school and you stay together.
Yeah. So he was a manager at that point, and his name's Jeff Glodney, and he was my manager. So he signed me. I didn't know anything. He was in LA, I was in New York, and thankfully he's an awesome guy. And he then switched to become an agent, and I signed with Paradigm. He switched to be with Paradigm. So then I have a different manager. But yeah, so anyway, just to say, I was auditioning for a lot of little beginner stuff, just as you do, when I was 19 or so. And I auditioned for Crash. I made a tape with one of my roommates I can't believe I made a tape for it. Back when tapes, this was 2007. It was way pre-tapes.
Yes. When tapes were literally, I'm not in the city, or I know I can do this, but nobody will see me. Please just watch this tape.
Yeah. So I got Crash and I didn't know it was recurring on the show, and it filmed over the summer in Albuquerque, and I didn't know anything. And I was in full acting school for theater, but I did not know anything about being on a set. Nothing, nothing.
So that's what I want to. Okay, so what did you learn? Because that's the thing I think people, when I've talked to so many people that have gone to conservatory, I didn't go to conservatory. So I learned on the job, right? Or I studied with a bunch of different people. And some of that studying was auditioning technique or doing certain things to be able to get the job.
Yeah.
I'm curious what you learned on set that you weren't able to get at the conservat at NYU, essentially.
Yeah, so part of the thing I loved about Atlantic is that it was a lot about technique. And it's still the technique that I use. It's called practical aesthetics. It's a very script-based, analysis-based, preparation-based technique. And I still approach all my jobs like that. So I learned that, and that was you would analyze whether it's a scene from a play or a scene from a TV show. And that works across the board. But we had very little on camera. I think we had one class on camera, and you could, I guess your senior year, you could take I forgot what it was called because it was so long ago. They had a studio that was like the film and TV studio, which you could do your senior year. At that point, I was already working, and I actually took my fall of my senior year off because I was understudying Speed the Plow. So at that point, I skipped over that. But
So marry with me the technique, the script analysis technique that you're getting from school. Obviously,
yeah,
you know how to break down a script. You know what to do. You made a great tape. Obviously, you got hired. So then when you get to set, what are the things that you're like, oh, I did not know that it
yeah,
operates like this?
I didn't know anything. And I think people can empathize since it's all actors mostly listening to this podcast. There's so many unspoken rules when you get to a set. You show up at base camp and the person who comes and greets you, and then you hang out in your trailer until you go, just like all of the logistics of the way. And thankfully, all sets are the same. We can all fit in mostly the same, like the setup. So we can all slide seamlessly into the same system. But I didn't know about marks. Like
Yeah.
I didn't
Shooting
know.
out of order, I'm sure, even too, right? Where
Yeah.
you're like, oh, wait, I'm shooting scene 15 on this day, but then 16 2 weeks later, and then scene 14 3 weeks later, the scene right before. Okay, how do I manage? And then even from television, I'm curious if Atlantic had a process for it's not like you just jumped into co-star land or a day player role. A reoccurring in television, you're not usually privy to the scripts that are coming up, but maybe for Crash, maybe you were, but then you're going week to make.
I think it was week to week. And I think a lot of people who studied theater and studied acting from that and then moved into film and TV will relate to this, that you go from being like doing Lady Macbeth and then suddenly you're doing like one scene in the kitchen for Crash, and that was still even a big part. I was lucky to be doing it, but it's not the same analysis of a character arc like you're getting at.
Yes.
So yeah, I was thankful. I was lucky that the grown-ups around me, because I was the only young person really who was in around for the most part on that. People were really generous and kind, and actors are awesome. Like people are for the most part, I'd say everyone I've worked with has been like so kind. And they were then, and they continue to be. And there was a lot of them just showing me what to do.
Beautiful. That's amazing. So then you have Crash, and then Some Boys Don't Leave was one of the cutest, best shorts. And then it got a lot of traction, you and Jesse
Yeah.
Eisenberg. So you've got these
Yeah.
two kind of good pieces of pitching for your manager at the time. I'm curious if the beginning of your career felt like, oh yeah, this is just what happens. I book everything. And when did that have a shift, or did it ever have a shift? Are you
Yeah.
kind of, yeah.
No, definitely there was a shift.
And when did the shift happen? Because you start at 19 and then
Yeah.
transition as people from decade to decade and you looked so young then. You could play all kinds of roles really young.
Yeah. Yeah. It was an interesting thing. Like, I think what was getting at about school, like, I was so determined and so single-minded. I'm sure that everyone who knew me during college thought I was like the least fun person on the planet, because I was so driven, and like failing was not an option for me. Like it wasn't an option financially, and it just wasn't I was like, I'm going to do whatever, not whatever it takes, but I'm going to work really hard at this. And so I think that we all know that there's luck involved in all of this. And also, I think an incredible amount of hard work. And I know plenty of people who have worked really hard and not had the luck that sort of pushes you over. But the Some Boys Don't Leave, for example, was a teacher from Atlantic. So a lot of my first jobs were actually from teachers that I think saw what was going on in school and my willingness to really work hard. And so she put me in that when someone else dropped out last minute. It was supposed to be someone else. And she called me at the last minute and was like, will you fly to LA and do this? It was actually my first time in LA when I did that short. Yeah. So I did that. And then I was doing commercials because I graduated college. I immediately had so much, the student loan payments were off the charts. And I was like, okay, I got to start doing commercials. This sort of dream of doing New York theater. And that would have been a total dream, is staying and doing that. But I came out to LA for pilot season right after I graduated, because I was like, okay, I have to work. And I didn't know anybody. It was incredibly lonely. It was deeply unfun. But I booked Lone Star, which was my first like big pilot job. And it was a Fox show and so at that point I was like, oh, my first pilot season. I don't know, this actually feels like I'm working really hard, but
It's working.
It's working. And then the show got picked up. And I was like, oh, which we all know back in pilot days, you used to do 1,000 pilots, and it's very rare for a pilot to get picked up back in the day.
Yes.
So the pilot got picked up. I was like, oh, okay, I guess I'm moving to Texas. We're like filming in Texas. It was like incredibly well reviewed. I went to Times Square. There's a billboard in Times Square. I like did a huge press tour for it. I'm like, I come back to LA. I'm on billboards everywhere. I'm like, this is amazing. And then we're in Texas. We're filming the rest of the season, and it was going to be premiere night. And I remember everyone kept being like, good luck tonight. Good luck. And I was like, for what? Good luck for why? Like we already
shot it. We're already good.
And nobody watched it. Nobody. And the next morning we were all like, oh my God, this is over. And by the next week it had been canceled. They called in the middle of filming one day and were like, it's over. Pack up your stuff and go home.
In the middle of filming.
Mm-hmm. Middle of a day.
Wow.
Yeah. Literally, James Wolk was filming in a car, and they radioed into the car and they were like, pull the car over. The show's canceled.
That's just it.
Yeah. And at that point, everyone was like, oh, and I was like, wait, what? I'd given up my apartment. You know what I mean? I just had no sense of like the volatility, sorry, of this industry. And at that point, everyone was like, yeah, you got to have a thick skin. And I was like, where were you a month ago when you were saying my life was about to change? Like, everyone's been like hyping me up. And at that point, I realized like, oh, you got to keep more even keel. Like you can't buy into that roller coaster.
And it's interesting when I was researching a lot of the stuff that you've done, I'm like, how does she recover? Because I feel like even what we were talking about off mic, school can prepare you for script analysis. A lot of the times, even school's character development, right? Really digging into a character and taking him on an arc and doing all this stuff. I've very rarely heard of a lot of schools or even any other acting teachers around really focusing on recovery of the business, and then recovery from certain characters. And I wanted to ask about specific characters about the recovery, but how do you recover from the business part of it not making sense? Because you've been doing it now for a long time, and I'm sure you've had a lot of these, but that was your first one.
Yeah.
When you had to pack up, is that when you decided to go to LA versus New York?
Yeah, I put everything in my like little crappy Volvo and I drove to LA, and I moved to LA at that point. And then I had other shows that were a success. Did a bunch of pilots that didn't go in a row, and some things worked, some things didn't. But it was the amount of times, and I'm sure lots of people have felt like this, like the amount of times that people have been like, this is going to change everything. And it's not to say it doesn't change stuff, but that sort of, even if it does change everything momentarily, you still have to recover. It always comes back to some level, right? And I'll never forget one of the guys during the press for that show. It was actually Matthew Morrison. He was like, because Glee was happening at the same time. And I was at a party, some random press, whatever, something. And he was there and he was like, and at the time, it it didn't quite land. It obviously landed because I still remember it, but there is something about that of like enjoying the highs and also knowing that like it'll just keep going. Thankfully, I think also having a rich life outside of it, honestly, is really, really important. And my agent said a long time, like probably around that time to me, like he was like, if you don't have something, like you have to have a rich life outside of this, or else part of this game is just sticking with it. And
Yes.
if you don't have a way to maintain and to feed yourself in a way that makes it so that you can stick with it, then you won't be able to, then you
Won't be able to do that. And I also, how do you not let it get into your mental space of going out for a pilot, getting the pilot? Like you've got that part down, right? You're like, I know how to get the job. You're
Yeah.
auditioning. I'm going to ask you about that in a second. Your auditioning technique is killing the game, right? Because you're scoring it. How do you not take it personal when the show get canceled? Now, any actor that's listening to this, if they don't already know this already, so much is out of our control. How much the show costs, what comes on before, what comes on after, what they're willing to do. Sometimes they don't, sometimes they just need it to burn through some money too at a different time. Not anymore with pilots. But how do you not start to take it personal, being in the ensembles, being the lead of certain shows, being the one or two? I'm curious how you kept that at bay.
That's a good question. I think just witnessing how many times it happens and happens both to me and to other people. And like, for example, Lone Star, we were, I'm not kidding, we were up against Bristol Palin. Remember her? Sarah Palin's daughter. She was on Dancing with the Stars, and we were
Yes.
up against her on that time slot. And they said at the time, that is why no one watched our show, which you're like, that's so random. That's so random.
So
Like,
random.
if that show
Yes.
had been a success, my life would have gone in a different direction. Who knows what? We never know, whatever anything could be.
We
But
wouldn't have gotten to see all these other great characters. There's
who
just
knows? It all just feels so random. I do feel like part of aging through this industry and part of it becoming a career as opposed to something that you're doing when you're young is weathering that storm and realizing how much is outside of your control. Even when you're doing auditions, I don't know. I've been friends with directors, I've dated directors, and seeing the other side of things where you're like, oh my God, the most amazing person for the most part is not getting the job. Like it's
say
some,
that louder for the people in the back. That's so true.
like
So
I've
true.
watched other people, I've watched audition tapes and been like, wait a minute. The person who should be getting this job is this person who's maybe not famous or maybe doesn't have the whatever, all the things, right? Maybe has
Mhm.
the wrong hair color, whatever.
It really comes down sometimes to that trivial of a moment, even though we're in a creative field, that they're like, oh, we really like Eloise, but we don't like that she has short hair. We really want it long hair. What? You can fix that in a heartbeat. It's so ridiculous. So ridiculous. So also dating directors, being around them, did that change how you auditioned when you got to see how other people were auditioning? Because I think that's one of the most invaluable tools as an actor, whether you're a reader at the beginning, whether you have exposure to seeing what other
Yeah.
actors are doing. Did seeing any of that change your approach to an audition?
I think it gave me more of a sense of just wanting to be the person when you walk in the room. Like realizing that everybody is the people on the other side of the table, they want the right person to walk in the room. Like they are like, please God, let our whoever, whatever, our
Mhm.
character walk in the door. And there's sort of a mental shift of being like, look, I am who I am. I'm not gonna, I can act my face off, but I'm still not gonna be a different person, like the soul of me. And sometimes there is just a soul thing that is part of what they're looking for, which is fine.
Mm.
All I can do is walk in and do the version that I would do if they were to hire me and do it with enough grounded conviction that they would feel lucky if they wanted, if it's me. And
Yes.
if it's not, then I know that at least I gave it my best shot. And
Yeah.
I'm not going to be
You're not precious about it. I think there's enough of a call and response in your career to be like, oh, okay, this isn't the right thing, something else will be. A lot of other times, people don't necessarily start off right away with that gangbuster of reciprocation from the industry, meaning
yeah,
I
yeah.
put in all this effort. I went to school. I know exactly what I'm doing. Sometimes that still takes people 5 to 10 years for the industry to be like, yeah, and here's your opportunity. It's so great that you got the opportunity early
Yeah.
And then I always talk about this on the podcast too, development and relevant, right? So in a development stage, you're just learning. Like you said, you crash, you're learning on set. Okay, then you're being a part of more relevant projects now. So you're starting to master the art of television, the art of the pilot. So now they trust you from your track record to give you opportunities to continue to lead shows. So then finally many shows actually click and many movies do, but we don't know. That's the part where we don't know when that's going to click. But I think understanding the business of how it works
Yeah.
then helps you have a little bit more ease to let one thing roll off and
Yeah,
not
and
be.
also just yeah, and watching also I think through decades now of doing this, like watching other actors who are older than me, who I super duper respect, who I've gotten the thankful opportunity to work near, and seeing that all of us are in the same boat of being like, yeah, we're just doing our best. We're just auditioning, still doing our best, and this industry is both super beautiful and that it's not lost on me for a second how lucky it is to get paid to do what I love and to get paid enough at it that like I can make a life of it. And that's super beautiful. And also it's super frustrating. It's super random. A lot of the times it doesn't make any sense, but we're all in the same boat.
All in the same boat. But what I love about this show is we very rarely get to spy on how other people are like auditioning, right? And that's what got me so excited when I started this 15 years ago. It's because how we get our job is the least talked about
Hmm.
amongst each other, right? So, and I think when we go from project to project, like you said, you get on Crash on the set and you're like, oh, I just learned a bunch of shit. Now you go and audition and you get on another set and you get on another set. So I have so many I want to ask about, but what is that one audition that finally started to allow you to click in that lane? Because it's different than being on set. It's a different muscle.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I can divide it between like pre-pandemic, pre-self-tape
Yes.
and post-self-tape. And I am one of those people I really miss auditioning in person. And I think the reason why I know there's tons of benefits to tapes, and I don't think I would be surprised if we ever go back. It seems like this is the new normal. There's a lot of freedom in that. There's a lot of creativity. The part that I loved about in-person auditions was the immediate feedback so that you knew, and not feedback of myself, but feedback of the person I'm looking, like the casting director or the
The
directors
reader.
or whoever's in the room. Because so often you would walk into an audition, you would do the scene, they'd give you an adjustment. I love adjustments too. That's the other part is like direction and adjustments is I think
That's
that's
your jam.
it's
Yep.
my jam. It's one of the major reasons I love being an actor, that creative like interaction. I can give that to myself, but it's not the same like leveling up of collaboration. And I love that you could meet with casting directors you loved and you could see on their face if you did a good job. And then you could be like, okay, whatever happens. But that felt good to be in here and have this creative moment. So I think back when we used to do in-person auditions, having a rapport with casting directors, having that sort of confidence that I could at least like walk in and at least have some sort of moment, have some fun, create something that was unexpected. And I still now in self-tapes try to create that unexpected moment.
And how do you create that? When you looked at the script versus because some casting directors are like, don't do a cartwheel. We don't need you to do a cartwheel. You're like going too far. But how do you look for the unexpected moment or what's your way in to be like, oh, this is going to be different than what they're seeing, but it's still in story?
For me, it's surprising myself. So in the performance of it, like being so present in the moment of it that I do something that even I am like, whoa, I wasn't expecting that. And when you're doing that in person with somebody, I found that easier to do. It's taken me a little bit longer to figure out in self tapes how to surprise myself in the performance of it. And the way that I found to do that in self tapes is actually to be less precious about it all. I find it's really easy for me to get really like, oh, I looked this way in this one moment, like over direct myself. And
Hmm.
I started to try to just be like, I'm going to do it a few times in the same way you would in an audition room
Hmm.
and in the same way you would on set. You get a couple takes at it, and I'm going to trust that I've done the preparation. I know this well enough, and I'm going to let myself just play. And then
Yeah.
whatever, and then unless I like really blow it when I watch,
Right.
if I watch the tape later and I'm like, I need to retape, I don't watch it as I'm doing it. I like tape it, I put it away, and then I pick the best one and I
A
send
little
it.
bit later. Yeah. A little
Or
bit.
yeah, yeah, after I like take off my whatever.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay. So then I'm curious. So the
yeah,
river felt so documentarian style-esque.
yeah.
And I know this was an audition that had to been in the room. So how did you handle that? Were you privy to how they were going to shoot it, and did that influence how you approached your audition?
They did improv in that one, which was, I have pretty much, have I only done dramas? I think I've pretty much only done drama, right? I'm a very, I'm a
You're very good at
I'm a
it. You're
drama
very
girl.
great at it. Yes.
Very
Yeah.
serious. And there's not a lot of improv normally, right? In drama. Like we're not like making, but that audition, I wasn't expecting this, but when I was in the room, they asked, I think it was probably in the callback, I would imagine, with the producers and director to improv into the camera. I forget what it was, but a monologue into the camera. And about, I don't know, they asked some question and I just spoke into the camera in character, which was cool. It was fun.
That
Yeah.
was great. Because that's where I wanted to even start. So then you go and you shoot the river. And
Yes.
there was some pretty intense stuff. And this is what I wanted to ask about the recovery. That felt super intense
Yep.
to start. Now, I know sometimes when you're shooting something intense, it's actually really funny when you call it a cut. It just depends. But what
Yeah.
kind of sense of recovery were you giving for your body, your instrument, and even your brain to sustain that character and that whole experience? Did you have anything set in place yet?
I don't think I had as much set in place as I should have. I was young, I was like 24, and I was still in the sort of just taking stuff as it came, right? I will say when the show didn't go a second season, that show was so hard. I was really bummed that it didn't go, but I was also concerned about how hard it was. And the filming of it was, we primarily filmed at night, which we would go to work at 5 o'clock and we would wrap at dawn, like pretty consistently. Sometimes we were doing splits, so we would start and then we start again on Monday at 5 a.m. So it was just, it was exhausting.
Okay, part two. Not that nobody else will know that this is part two, but our original interview was going really well. And then my internet shut down for pretty much 24 hours. So here we are a week later, picking back up. But where I loved where we were is you talking about coming off the river and learning about like a recovery process for yourself as an actor, for just yourself as a person. So I'm curious between the river and then the cross. I'm gonna jump leaps and bounds,
Yeah.
but the cross is so intense, specifically for you playing this character, a real person. I wonder, was there any sort of recovery process for you, either while shooting it or even while doing the audition? Did you get to talk to Shannon before you did this?
So Shannon, the character, is that was a written character, but she is like through the course of the show. I don't think this is too much of a spoiler at this point. If you are going to listen to the show, if you are going to watch the show and you're listening to this and you're like, just skip forward for 30 seconds. She's transformed into a real character, right? So she's transformed into Eileen Wuornos. So Eileen Wuornos is a real person. She's dead because she was executed. But yeah, so in the research for it all, I was doing a ton of research about Eileen Wuornos, and then also about my character Shannon is kidnapped and held hostage and goes through a lot of torture. And so really trying to figure out a way during the course of that, yeah, exactly, like how to both take care of myself and also like honor and pay tribute to the experience of people going through nightmares, which happens, and trying to bring humanity to that and bring a perspective to that oftentimes I think is left out of shows like this, where you don't get like a real sense of the victim beyond like a sketch. We were filming in Toronto. It was very cold. I was there by myself, and it required a lot of a lot of care to navigate through that. And I think one of the interesting things that I learned, first off, there was amazing people in the production who were taking very good care of me. I was like in great hands, so much tenderness, so much support. But the most interesting thing as an actor, I think I learned through that is you hear other people say this, your body doesn't know that it's fake. And
Yes.
that was so profound for me in this experience because I've been doing this a long time and I don't think I've ever really appreciated how much the characters have affected me vis-a-vis the physicality of what you actually have to go through for each different character until this one, because it was abundantly clear. I was really being put through the ringer physically. And even though I'm not a method person at all, I was coming in and out in between takes. My brain knows it's not real, but my body was traumatized from it.
Yes.
And it made me think back on all my other jobs. Whoa, what part of it did my body not know was fake from these other jobs? Maybe they were positive things, right? Positive experiences of falling in love or playing a character like in The Right Stuff that was like really profoundly feeling the impacts of sexism. So all of these little pieces, I think, as an actor, you can't help but pick up because it's, even though mentally it's all an intellectual exercise mentally, physically, it's not. So yeah, it took me a while to recover from Cross, honestly, just mentally and physically. I'm like tremendously proud of the work that we all did in that show.
It's beautiful work. It's intense work.
Yeah.
Finished the series last night, and that's where I was like, I really wanted to ask. And I've heard, and I've been on sets now too, where the intimacy coordinator is helping with certain things like this. If you'd be willing to, and every set's different. But did you ask for assistance, or was your production, was the crew just so amazing? Or how did you utilize the intimacy coordinator? Beyond just intimacy is also your body going through torture. It's not just sexuality. And I think that's one thing that I really want to make sure that people know how to utilize what SAG has implemented for us to have as protections on set. So how, if you're willing to speak on it, if that was just a production itself or who stepped in and how did you utilize them day in and day out?
Yeah. So shout out to intimacy coordinators. I'm so grateful that they are now becoming standard practice on set because I've done a lot of stuff where they weren't, and a lot of places where honestly I could have used one. And especially when I was much younger and I didn't know how to be an advocate for myself. So I was really happy. Mackenzie was the name of our intimacy coordinator. She was excellent. And production had her there. She was like totally available. I was really grateful for that. And she was just there as extra support. There wasn't necessarily like, there wasn't anything that I had a problem with that I needed her to handle, although she would have. But I was just grateful to have an advocate there on set. And the other thing that production was really sensitive to that I'm really grateful for is I really pushed myself, honestly, and I know a lot of people will probably relate to this, to ask for what I needed. And, it was a really challenging role. And there was times where I was bound and unable to get out of the bindings in between takes. And some of it was really intense. And those are days that there wasn't necessarily an intimacy coordinator on set. And so I asked production on days where I tied in to have somebody there whose role it was that day to make sure that I was physically okay, like bringing water or like just helping me get in and out of stuff. And they were wonderful to, on certain days, assign like PAs who would help with that. And honestly, those women and men, they changed the experience of it. So I'm really happy to production that they also asked for that. And it was scary to ask for, honestly. We all, I think, are trained to be good sports, right? But part of why I could show up so well as an actor and so deeply as an actor was because I felt really safe and I had to advocate for that. And it was received beautifully.
Yeah, I'm so glad you're saying that because I think it is how we advocate for ourselves. I even just worked on FBI International, and because of the subject matter, we had a therapist on set, not only for cast, but also for crew. Because sometimes when you're depicting trauma or real life situations, it goes beyond just the actor themselves that are putting themselves in that position. It's people that have been possibly in a similar situation. However, they're going to hate this word, but it's also triggered, right? However, our bodies respond to what we're witnessing, especially when the actor's doing a really good job. When you did such a beautiful job. Thank you for let people know, like, you can advocate for these things, and we shouldn't have to wait 20 years or decades into our career to finally realize that. I'm just so incredibly grateful. So you even said it took some time afterwards. What did you do afterwards just to assist your body and your mind?
Yeah, it happened to be the strike literally right afterwards. So there was no.
You, Eloise, way to just slam that. You're like, the whole industry is going to take a break right now.
Yeah, literally everybody took a break. So that was unfortunate, honestly, because I think we all want to be working. But so it meant that I was not working for quite a while, and just able to, even just having the seasons change made a big difference. Just physically taking care of myself, being around people I love, and also at the end of the day, like, it is acting, and I was deeply aware as I was doing all of that I could come in and out of this. I'm incredibly lucky to be able to just be like, okay, and that was the end of that job. Like, that it's a job. It's a weird job. What we do is weird for a living, right? Sometimes it's weirder than others, but at the end of the day, grateful for the work, obviously. And yeah.
And you and Aldous are so good in this.
Oh,
I'm going to shout you two out. Standouts. Standouts. Yeah, no, absolutely.
I felt really lucky to be, he's incredible also as a person. And some jobs, you feel so lucky. I feel lucky to take on any job, but some groups of people, some groups of actors, you feel really lucky to be a part of, and everyone's just leveling up each other's game all the time. And I really felt like that. It was, and I'm glad people seem to be loving the show too.
And those are the jobs you're like, please don't let this end. Please, can we come back? Because not every job's the same.
The TV and film landscape, it's constantly changing, but traditional actor training has largely remained the same.
It's focused on a theater model whose main goal is to help you stretch the expression of your instrument. That's why you can have years of training,
From scene study classes to audition classes,
to even an MFA, and still not be able to book a 2-line co-star.
That's why we created The Bridge for Actors.
A collection of tech, craft, and business online courses to teach you the skills that you need to go from a student of acting
To a working actor.
Okay, I have to rewind because I'll be remiss if I do not ask about 50 Shades. I need to know because everybody was reading the book. Did you read the initial book prior to any audition whatsoever, or did you read the book with the audition?
I read the book after, when did I read the book? I think I read the book after I got the job.
Oh, lovely. Okay, so when the script comes into your audition comes into the inbox, do you know anything about this?
Yeah, I mean, it was a massive phenomenon. There's so much content. I'm trying to remember the timing of when. I usually don't psych myself out by, I'll read the script. I'll get so totally into preparation in that way. But yeah, I don't think I read the book until after I'd been cast, but I'm not sure about that. Certainly not all 3 of them. Yeah. But there's so much information about it. But that was a crazy audition process.
That's what I want to know. It's because everybody in town was like, who's going to be these two? It was so wildly tracked from every side of, I think, the industry. Good press, bad press, good feelings about it, bad feelings about it, which is great traction. So I just was curious about the whole entire audition process for that.
That was one of the crazier auditions I've ever had. I mean, the initial one, this is back in the day, you'd go into the casting office and I did the initial audition just with the casting director and then I didn't hear anything. And that's so classic, right? And
you're like, okay, thank you.
Exactly.
Thank you.
And it was a huge job. And I knew that. And you know that so many people are auditioning for big jobs like this. So I didn't think too much of it, honestly. And then just about not hearing. And then a couple weeks later, I think I got a call back. And I think I went in and did it again. I'm not sure about it. This is so long ago. I'm not sure if there was a second callback. But the crazy part is that, yeah, there must have been a second callback with casting again. But then the crazy part was it was pretty close to when the first movie was starting. And so they invited me as my final callback, essentially, to do the table read without being cast in the project. So everybody else, I know it was nuts. Everybody else had been cast, everybody was cast, set in deadline, set, right? And I didn't have the job yet. And because I hadn't met the director, I hadn't met people yet. I hadn't done that level of callback. And so there was a whole debate with my team of that's pretty high stakes. It was like,
it is.
Do you do the table read? And it was the table read, like all of Universal, like all the executives. It was the first time anybody had all been in the same room. It was like the biggest table read I've ever witnessed in my career. And so we were trying to decide whether to do it or not, because if I did poorly, it's hard to do. It's intense, right?
Mm-hmm.
If I had done poorly, then that was it. And so there's a world where you say no to that, and then they're like, okay, we'll cast you and then use it as, but I was like, look, I come from theater, roll the dice. And if there's ever a moment where I feel like I can show up and do this, it's like doing a reading of a play. Like you get one shot at it and here you go. So I did it. And we went around the table. I cannot understate how big this table read was. We were going on this massive table, everyone's saying what role they're playing. And it gets to me and I was like, I'm Eloise Mumford. I'm reading the role of Kate, because I couldn't say I'm playing the role of Kate. I didn't have it yet. And Dakota's there, everybody's there, right? And we did it, and it was one of those moments where I was like, this is so high stakes, my brain can't even like compute.
That's what I was going to ask is I know you come from theater and it's like you have years of training for this, but was there anything specific you did that morning to be like, okay, this is like my one chance, we're going to go? Did you try to position yourself? Where are you in relationship to Dakota? Because you guys are playing best friends, right? So you have to create this relationship.
Yeah. I forget where I was sitting. It was one of those assigned things, like you've got the little name tag in front of you, whatever. And I think what I was thinking about that morning is back when I was in college and I understudied Speed the Plow, I went on once. I think we were talking about this earlier.
Yeah.
And it was truly the most intimidating thing I've ever done in my life, ever. And because performing in front, I'd never done the show with the other people, the other actors in the cast. And it was a full theater full of everybody who I knew, because they all knew I was doing it. And then just a bunch of random strangers. And I had to do it. And I walked out on stage with William H. Macy and Raul Esparza, who are two of the most amazing actors ever. And that was really intimidating. And I made it through. And so whenever I have moments like this, like the table read, I think back to that and I'm like, okay, this is intimidating, but it's not, I don't think it's as intimidating as that was. Let's just go
See
for
what
it.
happens.
And just try to treat it like it's like pretty normal, even though it's not. So anyway, I didn't hear anything, but I met the director, Sam, and like everybody, all the executives, everybody. I think all the other actors must have been nervous too, looking back on it, because you can get fired after table reads. It happens
all the time.
And so I think probably everybody was nervous. We were all in our own little pits of anxiety. It ended and I didn't hear anything for a while.
You didn't hear anything? Still that day?
No. Yeah, no. Didn't hear anything for, I forget, maybe a couple of days. And I was doing like a classic case of, I was like, I'm going to clean out my desk.
Right. You're like, what can I possibly do so I'm not looking at my phone every 5 seconds?
So I'd like, the desk I'm sitting at right now, I'd taken out everything out of the drawers, like everything's on the floor. And Sam, the director, called me. And she's like, hey, I just want to say thank you so much for doing the table read. And I was like, of course.
This is that very polite. We're not going.
And I'm very kind. And I was like, of course, like, it's my pleasure. And she's like, and we would love for you to come play Kate. And I like standing, in the middle of a huge mess. And it was really exciting. It was such a cool project to be a part of. It was something bigger than I've ever still been a part of. And I learned so much through that process of just a massive production.
It's $1 billion franchise that you ended up being a part of.
Yeah.
Yeah. What were a couple of takeaways that you learned that maybe would have been helpful for you as an actor stepping into a franchise? Really, you don't know how it's going to go, but if it goes well, you're tied into it. That's actually my question. For the contract for that one, did they tie you into the next couple? They did. Great.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. And I feel like every step along the way, it's been just learning on your feet, and it probably will continue to be too. But I guess what I learned the most is that it's really not about you. And there's a bajillion things going on, and all you can do is tend your own little garden of creating the good acting that you can create. And that was a learning curve. It was really cool to be part of something so big, and also honestly to get to watch like really great actors do their thing. And the sort of secrecy around it all was brand new to me too, like not being able to tell anybody I was in it for a while, not being able to talk about so navigating the NDAs of it all. And then I think also part of it was navigating like the sort of your expectation of what something will be versus what it is, like honest. And I think probably a lot of people can relate to that, and that you're like, everyone's telling you like, oh my God, this is going to do this for you, or
It's
this.
like your Lone Star moment. That's why I wanted to ask, because you have this Lone
Yeah.
Star moment where everybody's, this is going to change your life. Then
Yeah.
you sound down to a franchise and you
Yeah.
don't know where. That is also another one of those moments where I'm sure everybody was like, this is going to be life changing. I'm curious if what career changing, not life changing, let's say career changing,
Yeah.
being a part of that franchise.
Surely it was. But there's also it's that sliding glass doors thing of you don't, or sliding doors thing, not glass doors thing, where you never know like what it was. Years. We worked on that movie for years, and you never know which way something else you would have gone in some other direction. But I love Vancouver. I had so much fun being up there. I loved being part of something that was so global, and I love being part of something. Honestly, it sounds like odd to say now because it feels like it's much more obvious now, but that was a movie for women. And
Yes.
that at the time was brand new, proving. Now we've had Barbie, now we've had a couple.
Just a couple,
Let's not
truly.
oversell it. There's been a couple more instances of this where you're like, oh, a Wicked, and this is another great example of you can have a movie that is primarily appealing to a female audience, and it can clean up at the box office. And I was really proud to be part of that. I think it doesn't. Yeah, it's a great lesson for Hollywood to learn.
Yeah. And if you weren't allowed to tell people, how long were you able to tell, were your agents and managers or were they able to communicate internally that you were in this movie? Because that's part of the relevancy. Earlier, I talked about being in development and learning. Relevant, like you've mastered something, more people know what's going on. Things stick to you a little bit faster. But if they can't share that with you, like I did first season of True Detective, nobody knew what True Detective was, right? So I had to wait a year and a half before it came out, before it did all the things. Then it helped move my career. All of my girlfriends that got hired for season 2, before they even stepped foot on the set, they already were having opportunities for other things. That's part of understanding how the business and relevancy kind of works. Yeah. So if they were they able to utilize that internally? It just was an external thing that you weren't allowed to talk about?
Yeah, I think so. It was announced like fairly fast that I was in it. So at that point, it definitely could utilize it. But I think being part of these franchises is complicated, and that sometimes some people are really snooty and look down on projects. And I think that's a real bummer, because there's a million reasons for actors to do projects, namely that it's a job. And most of us are trying to make a living unless we have wealth, which I do not. So, like this sort of pick and choose your artsy movie thing was not an option for me, and not an option for lots of people. And I do feel like a lot of us faced this sort of judgment around some of that, and that was a bummer. And
then I know this is a sticky place, because then I normally ask people this too. It's once you get on a series, you get on Friends. Now you're Joey from Friends. It's hard to get another job, regardless of the prestige around it or not, right? It's just people see you a certain way. So sometimes it's hard to get the industry then to remember that you were an actor and you did several of the roles before. So did the right stuff, that came a few years later, because I feel like if it's nice to anchor things where you're like, okay, I did this big box office franchise movie. Also remember, I'm a damn good actress and I can play in different worlds, right? So I didn't know what was the next thing after 50 Shades that allowed you to remind people you're not just part of this franchise, that you are an actress. And you can do so many things.
Yeah, I did. I think my brain is like so many. You brought up so many things for me just now. I think that people on TV shows struggle with that a lot more, getting stuck in like a role, right? And I don't necessarily think that people were like, it wasn't that I got stuck as Kate or anything like that. The idea that like one job, certainly for some people, one job like changes everything and means that it like opens a million doors. I think the reality is, for the most part, you can have a big thing and then you're still fighting for every job. And that's what happened with that for me, is like, You can be part of something huge, and then you're right back to auditioning, and you're right back to the same realm of just fighting for everything. Yeah, I did a movie called Standing Up, Falling Down, which was a little tiny indie with Billy Crystal and Ben Schwartz, which was so fun after that to do something tiny.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah, if that was a choice, because I do also think the flip side of that is you're in a franchise movie. People know that this is seen globally, and then they want to throw other things at you, and you can make a decision. Sometimes you have some decisions during that time that you can make. And I love that I didn't know if you chose that, if that was specific to swing to a different way, or if that's just what came through.
I think that's just what came through. I'd love to be like, oh yeah, I was saying no to so many things. I wasn't.
Yeah.
Like that was just what came through. And then getting to do the right stuff, I was really grateful for. And then I've done a ton of Hallmark movies as well. And in between that time, I was doing a lot of Hallmark movies, which is like a whole other muscle and a whole other thing that I genuinely really like doing, which again, they're like female-centric stories, which like getting to be like the lead of a movie as a woman is so rare, like in carrying a film on your back or on your shoulders. And then also they shoot really fast. And there's something really fun about just like diving in. The people are wonderful to work with.
16 days later, you're home. Like it's not these months and months. And I actually wanted to ask that if you'd be willing to talk about that. Hallmark is changing their, I'd say, reputation right now in the last few years. But at that point, after 50 Shades, I'm really impressed that Hallmark also was like, yeah, sure. Because sometimes they get specific about the representation of the actresses and actors that they want in their movies, right? So 50 Shades, I love that they didn't have that same, they could have been like, no, that's not necessarily on brand for us. I'm glad that they allowed an actress to come and show like, oh no, I am versatile in both worlds. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I don't quite know how I slipped through the Hallmark maze. But I've been doing Hallmark for a long. It was one of my first major big jobs pre 50 Shades. I was doing Hallmark, and I was really grateful to get to like really do some interesting acting, I thought, honestly, and some, you know, try to bring like real depth of character and integrity. And yeah, I've done a bunch of different Hallmarks, and I'm really grateful for that, because part of this, as I've been saying this whole time, is like just resiliency and like earning a living as you go. And as fun as those little tiny indies are, you literally don't make money on them.
No, you don't make anything. And Hallmark is such a great family, and they take care of their actors so beautifully. They really do. When you're putting out 90 films a year, once you get into the Hallmark family, they really are fantastic to keep you afloat and working, and great environments, all their producers, all their directors. Hallmark is a great space to live and be in family for sure. So
I lost, by the way, fun fact, I lost my appendix during a Hallmark shoot, during a Hallmark movie, had my appendix out, and somehow we all navigated it and finished the movie.
Really?
Yeah.
Which one?
Oh my God, what was it called?
I'll look. I have it.
Love, The Presence of Love.
The Presence of Love.
Yeah.
Shot in England, and you got appendicitis
in the middle of it. Yeah. And they were great. We got through it.
That's why we have insurance days, right? That's what insurance is for, so they can take a second, recoup. Again, family. You're like, if you lose an appendix on a Hallmark film, you're forever in the family for sure. I always ask this, and you mentioned your technique at the beginning. I don't care which audition you want to choose, because you've done such a wide variety of incredible characters, incredible different stories. You really can't put you in a box. I know at the beginning of the conversation that we had the other day, you're like, I only do drama really. And I'm like, I don't really believe, like, I don't put you in that zone at all. You're very versatile. How do you handle when you get an audition, other than reading the script? What are some tangible things that you do to break down what you're going to do in the audition, or how you're going to cultivate this character?
One of my very favorite, or maybe my most favorite thing about preparing for an audition is figuring out what to wear. And hair and makeup. Like I love, always have like transforming into a character. And so for me, like figuring out exactly what I want to look like and how to transform myself to look like the character is usually my way in for the audition. Once I get into a role, it's much more about like nerding out about like preparation with reading and watching stuff and all that. But for an audition, like that seems to be the way that I like to get into it. Like for the right stuff, for example, I was a period piece and I wore like one of my grandmother's dresses. It was back when it was in person, and did like full 1950s hair and makeup. And I love that stuff. I love it. And it allows me to figure out how I intersect with the character. And so, yeah, I would say that. And then reading scripts, obviously. And then just not being too precious about it and trying to make interesting choices, like I was saying earlier, but also not overthinking it and not, because I figure like I'm either the person or I'm not.
Yeah, honestly, after doing this for over 20 years and then talking to everybody, talking to so many other actors, it is very rare that if the part is yours, there is nothing you can do to stop that. Truly. Even that means I've had people be told no by 3 or 4 casting directors, and the project then goes away and comes back with new casting. And guess who ends up getting that part, right? It just feels like when it's yours, it's really, truly yours. And I love that saying of like, all right, let's see what happens. And then it's nice to be able to have fun in that manner. Then you're not trying to be so result oriented. And I think that
honestly, like the person who I do most of my auditions with is my mom, which is really, yeah, I know. It's so funny. It just was born out of like back in the day, the only time when you would do self-tapes is when you weren't in person, right? Or in town. And I started doing self-tapes way back in the day with her and trained her, honestly. She's not an actor, but trained and not interested in being an actor. You know what I mean? None of that. But I had trained her to be super neutral, so neutral with the off-camera stuff. And so just over the years, we like really worked into a rhythm of, I don't know, there's no pressure in it. I feel like I can be like, Mom, say this faster, and she doesn't. Sometimes, I don't know, if you've done like self-tapes with partners, I find it really hard because there's like feelings that hurt.
Yes. Or some, I've even been impressed that you're able to do it with your mom. But I think the key thing that you're saying right now, and I think a lot of actors have to learn how to do this. And when we used to go in the room, they wouldn't do this, is directing your reader for what you need. And I think the self-taping landscape lends itself to that. And if you ever have to go in as a hybrid, which I've done a couple of times now, I will tell the casting director how I want it, which 10 years ago, I wouldn't have done that. I would have been like, oh my God, okay. I'm like, can you just give me a moment here? And it's not like telling them how to do, but just, hey, do you mind giving me just one moment here? Or I'm going to enter, can you give me a few seconds? Really taking ownership over how to give yourself the best. And I think that's great. I cannot believe that your mom's doing it still to this day. Does she still do it?
Yeah. And honestly, I don't know. She's not precious about it because she's been on this journey with me the whole time. You know what I mean? So it's not, she's, oh my God, an audition for this. It's just, oh, okay, who am I playing today? And so like, and she did the cross tape with me. Yeah. And I remember I very rarely tell her to act, but I did actually need her to be like, to say much. There's like a scene where he's like yelling at me. And I was like, Mom, I need you to be like, Shannon, like actual shout at me. And we did it over and over again. But that tape wasn't perfect. Literally the sound cut out during one of the scenes. I was screaming so loud in the scene that the sound in the microphone cut out. So when I played it back, I was like, I open my mouth, I'm screaming, sound completely cuts out. And then I stop screaming. And my mom, the character that my mom was playing, they can't hear you. And I watched the tape after I finished doing it. And like I said, I don't watch them while I'm filming. So it was after we had taken everything down. And I was like, oh shoot, should I retape this because the sound cuts out during it? And I was like, you know what? I actually think it's cool. And if they want me to redo it, I'll redo it. But like, I sent it off like that. And I booked the job off that tape. They never saw anything else that I did.
I'm so glad you shared that part of it because auditioning is not perfect. I really actually like when people when they drop a line, it's how they stay in, right? Or something happens, like you said, it discovers something. No audition needs to be perfect. I think a lot of actors are always like, I need to make this perfect. I need to be word perfect, unless it's Sorkin. Okay, let's be, as long as you're saying they're going for the essence and even how you handle, I think, normal situations.
Yeah.
I love that you said that it wasn't even perfect. Okay, let's do some fun rapid fire questions and then I'm gonna let you go. Thank you for doing this again. This is
Oh
really
yeah, so fun.
okay. Strangest place you've ever auditioned?
Oh God. I auditioned in a lot of like hotel corners with the hotel trash can, like flipped upside down with my laptop on top of it. I think that's probably the strangest, like literal corners of hotel rooms to try to get good lighting.
Get it good.
Yeah.
What do you think has been your best audition?
I think my audition for the right stuff was, I would say, I don't know. I didn't see it because it was pre self-tape time, but the writing was so excellent. And I just really, I don't know, there's something about that role and something about that creative team. I remember walking out of that audition and being like, okay, if I don't get that job, then I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know. Like,
Yeah.
I don't know what to say.
And there's nothing better than an in-room best audition where everything just clicks. I do think that it happens a few times in a career. Material is great. You're perfect for it. You have everything. It just, that triangle of synchronicity just comes together. It's chef's kiss. Okay, worst audition, if you're willing to say.
I auditioned once. I don't even remember what it was for, but it was like ages ago. Ages ago when I first came out to LA, and the casting director literally took a phone call during my audition, which, like, fair enough. It was obviously important. An assistant came in, but when the casting director came back, she was like, "Okay, let's pick up where you left off." And that's when I was like, "Wait, what?
What?
What?" I was like, "Can I start over?" And she was like, "You don't need to." And I was like, "Okay, I'm clearly not getting this job."
Okay, bye. Oh God. Those are the worst. That's what I don't miss about being in person. There's like somebody sitting there eating the whole time and you're like, okay, can you stop just for a second? Most ridiculous thing you've been asked to do in an audition.
I used to do a lot of commercials or audition for a lot of commercials, certainly. And I have this very distinct memory of being asked to eat a hamburger, miming eating a hamburger, which I'm sure everybody who's auditioned for commercials have had to do that, where you're like, okay, here we go. And then you're like holding it up to your mouth and then biting, chewing, all the whole deal.
So
A lot
ridiculous.
of the commercial audition stuff I found really hard. And like blessings to everyone who can do that sort of stuff.
Miming just takes me out. I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. Okay. Do you have an audition song or music or something that pumps you up before you go?
Oh gosh, not anymore because I'm just in my house. But yeah, I used to do serious pump ups in the car. I also had a whole routine of how many times to run the scenes before in the car, like sitting. Yeah, like whole lots of routines about like how much to run stuff.
That's when I like audition superstitions. So did you have a certain number that you would do? What was the number?
Yeah, I would run it 3 times.
I love this. Yes.
I would run them 3 times a night before I went to sleep for as many nights as I had it. But it had to be like right before I went to sleep. But then then I usually I think I'd run it 3 times again, like the day of, including once in the car. Now my superstition, I'd say, is actually more like taping with my mom.
We're gonna get mom a job on one of these things. You're like,
She wouldn't even do it. That's the irony. If they were like, "Hey, we want you to be in this," she'd be like, "No."
no. Well, to give you producing credit, thanks so much for bringing this to the table. That's so great. What's the one role you wish you could steal or wish you were so close to getting that you wish you could have had the opportunity to do?
Oh man, this is just because I'm a musical theater nerd, and this is just at the time I really wanted this job. Remember Smash?
Yeah.
The
Yeah.
musical? I came very close to getting that job, and I would have loved to do it. Not that it became some great thing that changed lives, but just because getting to sing in the audition was so fun, like getting to do musical theater. Musical theater still is my like heart of all hearts. And so getting to do that I would have loved that.
It would have been all the things. There'll be one. There'll be one coming up, I'm sure. What's the one thing you've done that you wish more people would see?
The right stuff. I loved that. I loved that job. I loved that job.
I really thought it did well, but I really thought it was during the audition process and all the scripts and how they were even being during the audition process. I really had big hopes for that.
Yeah,
I know a lot of people that are in that show with you, and it came out, and I think we're just so saturated with so much stuff. That's why I like asking this question, is because there's so much stuff out now. We don't get
much stuff. Yeah, and I feel like it came out during the pandemic. It just, the whole thing, it was like everything that could have, there's so much luck involved in all of this, and it's every turn that it could have gotten. Yeah, that was a rough one. And I also, honestly, I really hope people watch Cross. I'm like crazy proud of the show, crazy proud of that show. And proud of what we did in it. And yeah, I really hope that people watch that. It made a huge splash in it when it came out. And I hope that people continue to watch it because it's very dear to my heart.
So people can watch it on Amazon Prime. They can watch the whole entire season. It's definitely one of those things you need to sit down, and it is a rough thing to go through. But you guys did such a beautiful job. Kudos to you, and truly being of service, using your whole body to be of service. It was so fun to get to go through your whole entire plus years of great work. Thank you for letting me pick in about like recovery and certain things, because you do have such a dynamic career. And I think it's really important to pull back how we handle going from project to project. That's something that we just don't talk about. So thank you. Where can everybody find you and follow along with the things you got going on?
I'm on Instagram, Eloise Mumford on Instagram, and that's
all we need. I think there's going to be other platforms we're going to start with here soon, but for now,
we're in that weird moment where it's like, even Instagram, I'm like,
I know, we'll see what happens. Yeah.
But yeah, thank you. It's been so nice chatting, and it's so nice. But it's a weird career that we're all in. We're so lucky to be in it, and there's so many wonderful things about it. And I also think it's like important to have community to talk about the things that are like, they're hard, but we're also aware that we're so lucky. So it's hard to talk about some of that stuff. But I'm really grateful to be an actor. I'm continually more and more proud to be part of this community. So thanks for having this show that's about that.
Thank you for saying that. I really think Bill Esper always says it takes 20 years to make a good actor or make a good career. And you're just at that, I feel like you're at that precipice of what comes next. It's going to be even more dynamic. And it is an honor to be of service to great stories, even though people hate saying that. But that's just exactly what it is. That's what your job is. How cool. How amazing. You're delightful. Thank you.
Thank you. It was so nice chatting.